Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's final press conference of this 2024 season is in the books, and I've got the spark notes for you. Shanahan said that he is, quote, open to anything as far as the 49ers' new defensive coordinator and his style. And I think that marks a big change over prior years. Yes, they had inquired about the availability of Bill Belichick and Steve Spagnuolo last season, but that was never a realistic swing. I think this season, the 49ers might take a realistic swing at a coach who does change the foundation drastically of their defense. They also could stick with the same foundation if they're able to land Robert Saleh, whom they're expected to offer to return as the 49ers defensive coordinator. But a move like that is definitely not a slam dunk, since Saleh is interviewing for head coaching positions. He's got an interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars on Tuesday. Shanahan today said that Brandon Staley, who did a good job with the 49ers cornerbacks, that's who he primarily worked with this year, is an internal candidate. And Staley has been a Vic Fangio disciple in the past. That's a 3-4 defense, which would be a departure from what the 49ers run in their 4-3. Anyway, the groundwork is at least there for the 49ers to make a more drastic change than they have in the past on the defensive side of the ball. I then asked Kyle Shanahan about Klay Kubiak, the 49ers pass game specialist who was allowed to call plays in the season finale at Arizona. And Shanahan, in his answer to me, revealed that Klay Kubiak is going to be promoted to offensive coordinator. Now, Shanahan tried to downplay this. He said that he's essentially going to have the same role as last year, but it is worth mentioning that only one Shanahan lieutenant in the past has actually been promoted to the name of, or the role of, offensive coordinator, and that was Mike McDaniel. And I do think that the 49ers and Shanahan can stand to benefit from, even though Shanahan is still a play caller, they can stand to benefit from the rise of an offensive assistant who is respected enough by Kyle Shanahan that he can hold the whole process accountable, especially on game days where the 49ers don't want to fall into another rabbit hole like the one they did against the Detroit Lions when they called 16 straight pass plays to end that game. It's all about staying balanced offensively, and it is very clear that Klay Kubiak is rising up the ranks of respect offensively with this new title of offensive coordinator. And then all three coordinators are going to change, obviously, because special teams coordinator Brian Schneider was fired a couple days ago. Nick Sorensen is a candidate for that special teams coordinator role, although I do get the sense that the 49ers would prefer to bring in somebody from out of house to try to fix the special teams, which were the worst in the league this year. Other notes, the 49ers are adamant on keeping Deebo Samuel. John Lynch said that he's not in the business of letting good football players leave the building, and Samuel still under contract for this 2025 season. The Javon Hargrave maneuver was explained in more detail. He is scheduled to become a free agent now in March, but the 49ers are still interested in keeping him. They were able to reduce the base salary of Javon Hargrave for a post-June 1st release because they're in a tight salary cap situation, but that doesn't mean that they are completely disinterested in keeping Javon Hargrave on this football team. He'll be able to test his market, but if his market is best with the 49ers, and if he does wish to return, maybe San Francisco and the defensive tackle, who was effective right before he got hurt in Week 3 against the Rams, maybe that means they can extend this agreement beyond the 2024 season. And finally, the 49ers, again, this was very clear from John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. They affirmed that Brock Purdy is their guy moving forward. And I think that signs do point to the 49ers and Purdy being able to finalize a contract extension, maybe even before phase 1 of this offseason. Anyway, right after the press conference, I joined Greg Papa on KMBR. Greg Papa and Greg Silver, both of the Gregs on KMBR, to talk about some of what had happened at the press conference and some of the 49ers strategy moving forward regarding the coaching staff. This obviously is the biggest shakeup that we've seen so far in the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era, with 3 new coordinators coming aboard in 2025. So here's what I had to say on KMBR.
Is 49ers reporter for the San Francisco Standard, and we've had him on once before. Always great to have our good friend David Lombardi join the show, and he joins us courtesy of the UMA guest line. David, how are you?
Doing great. I think I've been on way more than once. I love coming on with you guys. And
Just
today's a
this
good day to
iteration
talk.
of the show. Just
Okay,
this
this iteration of the
Yeah.
show. Got it. Got it. Yeah, because Greg, you sound familiar. I think I know you. So
Which Greg? There's two Gregs. It's
yeah,
Greg
it's
on
true.
the
There's
Greg.
two of you now. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you guys need a Greg squared or something like that.
We
Be
do.
kind of cool.
We do.
So yeah, I think you guys played the main clips.
Yeah, you were in the room that it happened in. Just your thoughts, because I know you were wondering about a scheme change on defense. So where do you think they need to go to generate more pressure? And are they just kind of waiting for Robert Saleh to be available to take this job if they can get their hands on him?
Well, so first things first, officially there will be 3 new coordinators for the 49ers next year. I think that's the biggest overarching takeaway of this, because offensively, Klay Kubiak is officially now going to be named the offensive coordinator for San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan's still going to be the primary play caller, but I asked about Kubiak calling plays in that last regular season game. He also called them during the preseason for the 49ers. And Shanahan, he tried to downplay it a little bit. He said, yeah, I'm still going to be calling the plays, but Klay is officially going to be the offensive coordinator. And I think it's really important to read in between the lines. The 49ers don't just toss out promotions like candy on the offensive side of the ball. And sorry, there's a lot of beeping here. I'm in the hallway at Levi Stadium, so there's a lot of noise. I can't really move anywhere else. But anyway, Klay Kubiak, I think, has earned the same level of trust and respect as Mike McDaniel had within the offense, because the only other offensive staffer previous to this that had been promoted to an offensive coordinator position had been Mike McDaniel. And I do think that it's really important that Kyle Shanahan has somebody that he trusts that much to remind him of the big picture of the course of games. I mean, they like we talked about against Detroit, the 16 straight runs to end the game. The Brock Purdy's second interception came on the 10th straight run. It's really important when you're in the weeds.
16 straight passes.
So yeah, 16 straight passes. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
16. Yeah, it's really important to have that check in the midst of games. And I think Mike McDaniel helped with that. And I think that Klay Kubiak, this elevation to offensive coordinator, I think that does represent an evolution of the offensive coaching staff. So that's one new coordinator. There's obviously going to be a new special teams coordinator. And now you asked about the defensive coordinator. The quote that you guys played where Kyle Shanahan said he was open to anything is the big answer for me, because I went into this press conference wondering if they're going to be rigid, sticking to what they've run over the past 8 seasons, which obviously has evolved. But they've never truly departed from that. They've never truly stepped into entertaining the idea of a 3-4 or any really, really drastic changes. And the fact that Shanahan said that he's open to anything means that I think he truly is open to anything. It's really going to depend on the interview process, who's available, who impresses them. And you have to marry it with the personnel that's going to be available. So you have to study free agency, you have to study the draft, you have to study your own players and the contractual situations. Dre Greenlaw is obvious at the top of that list, and figure out what's going to work best for the 49ers. So this is going to be one fascinating offseason. And I think what we learned from this press conference is that there a lot of changes are possible for the 49ers. And I do think that's the flexibility that fans have wanted to see from Shanahan and Lynch.
So, David, one of the things that stuck out to me in the press conference was just the general conviction on Brock Purdy. John Lynch coming right out and saying, Brock is our guy. Kyle Shanahan saying, I want to be with Brock for as long as I'm here. And also adding in the note of the OTAs, saying, I think it's important for everybody to be here with 14 weeks in between end of season and OTAs instead of 8. I know the contract thing is going to be a big talking point and kind of the big focus of the offseason. So there's going to be a lot of speculation from everybody. But do you think just between what Brock said in the locker room about wanting it to get done easily and no drama, and what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch just iterated at the podium, do you expect there to be a greater willingness to compromise than we've seen in some of these other negotiations with guys like Ayuk and Bosa?
I don't think there needs to be a whole heck of a lot of compromise here, because I think that the parameters are very clearly set. I don't think they were as clearly set with somebody like Brandon Ayuk last year. But the fact of the matter is that the 49ers need a good quarterback. Brock Purdy very clearly is a good quarterback. And when you have that need and then you have that availability, the market rate should be fairly easily defined. And yes, the market rate for a good quarterback is expensive, but that's part of doing business in the NFL. So the 49ers would be out of their minds if they weren't planning to pay Brock Purdy his contractual worth. Now, everybody's going to be talking about average per year as if that's some kind of big determinant of whether or not the 49ers can afford this deal. It actually isn't a big determinant of whether or not they can afford this deal. It's about the structure that they can get. And I think looking at the deals that the 49ers have executed here in the recent past, the mega deals for Bosa, for Brandon Ayuk, we get an idea of how they're going to try to structure this deal to fit under a rising salary cap. They're going to backload a lot of the cap hits. And I think that it's absolutely possible to play Brock Purdy at or near the top of the market while maintaining flexibility elsewhere. They've been really good at this. And the reason that all sides seem really confident is that they recognize how good they've been at this, and it is really the only logical path forward for the 49ers.
And John and Kyle backed in on that, double down with John saying he's our guy, being around a long time, and Kyle had the real clear one, plan on being with Brock all the time I'm here. So we'll see. It is expensive with a quarterback. Dre Greenlaw is interesting, and John Lynch, the quote is, doing everything that we can to bring Greenlaw back. But the reality is, not a lot of teams pay, and you're perfect at this because you know football inside and out. You know the importance of Dre Greenlaw to this defense, but you know what is reasonable to pay. Not all teams choose to pay off-the-ball stacked linebackers like Warner and Greenlaw a lot of money. The Rams don't do it. They let guys go or they trade. Ernest Jones IV when he's going to get one of those contracts. Fred is already one of the highest-paid linebackers in football. Can the 49ers afford to pay a second off-the-ball linebacker? And I don't know. I think the question is, in light of his injuries and severe injuries, how much will Dre really get on the open market? But your thoughts on just paying two stacked linebackers the top of market?
I'm not really sure if they can pay both of them top of market. Dre currently is making $8 million a year. And I only use the APY to give a rudimentary ballpark idea of where these players are at, because again, structure means a lot more than the average per year. But so Dre is at 18 and Fred is at a little bit north of 19 million per year. So he truly is top of market. I think he's officially number 2, I think behind only Roquan Smith. But the issue with Dre Greenlaw is that he only played a half plus 4 snaps this year. So the explosiveness was back. We saw that over the first half of the game against the Rams. It was one of the most amazing things I've actually ever seen on a football field, because he had torn his Achilles 305 days prior to that. I did not expect the burst to be back the way that it was, but that's only one of the boxes that you have to check. Other box is the durability, and obviously he hadn't checked that box yet. So my thought was that would lead his price to be at least slightly depressed over the course of this offseason. We all know that Dre Greenlaw should be in the double digits when it comes to APY. That's how good of a linebacker he is. But given the fact that he only played 34 snaps this year, I think that there might be a discount to be had. And that's why, right now, we don't even know what the 49ers are going to be running defensively next year. The wide 9 that they have been running over the past, 4 or 5 seasons at this point has been highly dependent on excellent linebackers, because there's bigger gaps in between the defensive linemen. Linebackers have to plug the run, and obviously in the modern game, the linebackers have to cover. So Dre Greenlaw was really a perfect player, and Fred Warner has been a perfect player for what the 49ers have run. If whatever they run moving forward slightly de-emphasizes the importance of that linebacker position, then all of a sudden your cost strategy might change at the position. So we need to know what Dre Greenlaw is actually worth on the open market, or just because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, given the complicated balance between his explosiveness and his durability. And B, we need to know what the 49ers are going to be running, so we know what, his exact worth to them specifically is going to be. But, if it were 2 top of the market linebackers, 2 guys in the double digits APY, I think that would be tough for the 49ers to afford. But I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that kind of price tag for Dre Greenlaw.
Talking to David Lombardi, and speaking of priorities and guys that may or may not be here next year, the press conference ended talking about Deebo Samuel, and John Lynch said they expect Deebo to be back. And I just want to ask you, David, I know that he's still under contract for another year, but there is a possibility that he's gone, and we saw Ricky Pearsall flourish in the last couple of years. Where do you think Deebo ranks kind of on the priority list of all this when we talk about interior defensive linemen, offensive line, Dre Greenlaw. Like, there's a long list of ways that the 49ers need to retool, even though they're not in a full-on rebuild.
Well, it's not just about replacing one receiver with the other. I think we've seen it not just this year, but in years past. You want to layer depth at every position, really. But with the offensive receiver, the Kansas City game in Week 7 was a great example. Deebo Samuel was about to check into the hospital with pneumonia. Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL. Jawan Jennings was out with hip injury, and Christian McCaffrey was obviously on injured reserve at the time. So the 49ers were down 4 of their top 5 eligibles, and the result was predictably disjointed and ugly for the offense. So if you can stack weapons, you're going to have a better chance to insulate yourself against the chaos of injuries, which inevitably comes in the NFL. That's why John Lynch said you don't just let good players walk out the door. That being said, I don't think that Deebo has been as good of a fit with the style of play that Brock Purdy brings to the table as he was with Jimmy Garoppolo. Purdy is throwing the ball further downfield. You're looking for, especially this year with Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey out for most of the season, the 49ers were, short, a man-beating wide receiver, more of your standard X wide receiver. So Deebo Samuel didn't fit that puzzle as well. Plus, he was dealing with a lot. He was dealing with an oblique injury, and then he had the pneumonia that can take a while to recover from. So the whole Deebo Samuel experience this year wasn't what the 49ers had seen in years prior. That said, I'll go back to my first point. You don't let good football players walk out of the building. He's still a good football player. I think he still has a lot in the tank, especially given what he was fighting through this year. So I think it's always a priority to maintain as much firepower as you possibly can, if you possibly can do that.
Lastly, David, you were wondering about the scheme and would Kyle adjust, and he said, I love the scheme, but I'm willing to adjust, and he's open to anything. I mean, last year he did reach out to Bill Belichick and offered him the defensive coordinator job. He tried to bring in the guy that beat him in the Super Bowl just days earlier in Steve Spagnuolo. And Steve now is getting interview requests for to be a head coach at last, again, in the NFL. If Kyle could get anybody, do you think? I mean, guys that are going to be head coaches, just take it out there. Saleh seems like the guy from a scheme, and the guys in the room know him and love him. Jeff Ulbrich was out there. As we start to hone in on guys for this DC job, what do you think you're looking at here?
I really think that Robert Saleh, since he was the initial architect of this defense, would be a dream scenario, because he's also now had a chance to leave, go to New York, be a head coach. Obviously, there was a lot of drama there. So much of it was outside of his control, but I think that could, Robert Saleh's built to the right stuff. I think all that experience probably only helped him become a better coach. And the 49ers need somebody who's obviously familiar with the way that they operate in the building, but obviously somebody who can evolve as well. And we've seen Kyle Shanahan try to spur on the evolution of this defense with some of his moves in the past. I mean, they brought in Steve Wilkes and told him, hey, we want you to learn our system, but then we want you to integrate stuff from outside the system. There was a similar idea, although Brandon Staley doesn't have as much power in the organizational structure since he's not the defensive coordinator, but they also wanted him to bring in some outside ideas. So there's been this push for an evolution of the defense. You could also go back to Joe Woods when they brought him in to pair with Robert Saleh. I think that worked extremely well for the defensive backfield. And I think that push to evolve would really work with somebody like Robert Saleh, because it's not like he's just been sitting in San Francisco for all of the past 8 years. He has seen other stuff in the league. He's been in another position. And he evolved impressively the last time that he was the 49ers defensive coordinator in 2020. It was the year that a lot of people are comparing to this 2024 season. The 49ers had a tremendous amount of injuries. He missed Bosa for essentially all of the season when he tore his ACL. And Saleh was still able to field a top 10 defense, which is something the 49ers obviously were not able to do this season when the defense dropped to number 26 in the league. So I think that would be, your golden goose here. That would be the candidate that might fit what you need and what you want the best. I just don't know if it's going to be possible because Robert Saleh is interviewing for head coaching positions.
Well, if he does end up coming back to the Bay Area, we will certainly be using that phrase golden goose as a regular here on the show. He is David Lombardi. You can read him in the SF Standard, and really appreciate your time. I know you're out at Levi Stadium giving us that valuable instant reaction, so can't thank you enough, David.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
There's the full update. Stay tuned. Later tonight, we'll have the big live from back in the studio, breaking down this very, very important 49ers day of information, as they have now firmly turned the page from their disappointing 2024 season to what will be a very interesting 2025 offseason.